Welcome back to Fast Market here on Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall alongside our Tom White in our Chicago studio. Time now for our cash tag segment. For that, we want to bring in our next guest, and that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. She's taking a look across data trends for Best Buy versus other retailers. Happy Friday to you, Megan. Let's get right into it. I know that I've seen one of your charts, and you have some trends as it relates to Best Buy, and you've got some other retailers on this list. Talk to us about what you're noticing in the latest trends.
Yeah, so whenever we look at Best Buy, this is actually a really interesting one for us because we're setting up ahead of its critical and its peak holiday season where we see some ramped up traffic. And when you look at this chart, it might be a little bit misleading at first glance because you see Best Buy versus peers, value peer like a Walmart versus a convenience peer like an Amazon, and it's trailing when it comes to digital traffic. When we look at those web visits, it's down about 4% year over year, but I'll place this with a caveat that this is actually an improvement from what we saw if we were to look at this a quarter ago. And I'll also note that it's accelerating if you kind of tighten up this moving average. So, I actually pulled this and looked at this just in the last couple of weeks, and that already has shifted into positive territory for Best Buy. And so I think that this is an interesting name to watch because the company has made some strategic moves to kind of expand its marketplace and also take a bite of some of shoppers who may typically not have reached for a Best Buy when they were looking, to buy their electronics. One of the things that we've been tracking is its partnership with Uber Eats. The company announced this earlier this month, and it really expanded its assortment. So if consumers, need to grab a pair of headphones, a charger, some of these low friction items, they're able to, now grab that and order that from Best Buy. And that's a consumer that may not have been previously reached. So we think that this is a smart move for Best Buy, especially ahead of this holiday season. And then we're also watching just adoption of its marketplace at large. Best Buy is expanding to some third-party sellers, doubling its product assortment and also opening up its ad inventory, right? And so this could be another potential growth lever for Best Buy. So I think that this is one where when we look at this company, we see, the stock has rallied off of those April lows, but it's still trading around 10% lower year to date. And we're starting to see some signs of life and some signs of improvement in Best Buy ahead of a really critical holiday season. Earnings aren't until the end of November, so we've got some time to monitor this, but it's certainly starting to feel like a bit of an inflection point for Best Buy, at least in our data.
Yeah, I gotta kind of get into this. The one chart that you have, the web visits versus the stock price. The stock price is still above, your data as far as web visits. I just look at the competitive landscape here, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Costco that sells a lot of TVs now, and from my own personal experience, are you guys, on the data that you guys are seeing, are you guys seeing the competitive pressures being there where maybe people aren't buying these big ticket items, especially in electronics? And if they are, maybe they're not going to Best Buy as much as they used to because there's so many other ways that you can purchase this stuff at this point. Or is it because more people need help and the Geek Squad's good for Best Buy? Are you seeing those type of trends that are actually helping maybe your sentiment?
We're actually seeing both kind of scenarios unfold at the same time. I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot of people who, are already going to Costco. They'll grab that TV from Costco. We saw last quarter pressure on those big ticket items, even, Best Buy acknowledging that weakness there, even in regard to appliances and things like that as home renos kind of fall. And so I think that those are certainly headwinds. But on the tailwind side, we have seen an improvement in our sentiment readings, partially because of that Geek Squad, like you mentioned. Another area where we're watching that's kind of a unique tailwind for this season is we have a lot of really cool products that consumers seem really excited about heading into this holiday season. Notably, we're watching a really strong Apple upgrade season. Whenever we looked at our keynote demand, we have that demand about 6% higher on a year-over-year basis versus last year. And for us, that tends to be a really strong indicator of Apple demand. And so, a lot of consumers want to go in and they want that help if they're buying a new Apple device. They want to understand what they're getting their hands on. And I think Best Buy has an advantage there. And then another one is Meta is actually setting up some in-store demos for its Ray-Ban smart AI glasses in Best Buy. And we've seen a lot of people who are going in to experience that. And you can't necessarily get that hands-on experience at an Amazon, at a Walmart. So Best Buy certainly has some differentiators that we're watching right now. that's helping to kind of boost that sentiment that we haven't necessarily seen, and we didn't see that last year. So that could be somewhat of an unexpected catalyst heading into this holiday season, and certainly something we'll be tracking, because if you look at that stock chart, you're right, the web mentions haven't caught up yet, but Best Buy is also a very seasonal beast. And so this is one that we're watching really closely, because we would expect that traction and that traffic to really increase, especially as the holidays, as Black Friday shopping picks up. And we're starting to see signs of maybe Best Buy has reached that inflection point of that weakness, that they're starting to kind of overcome some of those obstacles and those competitive barriers and be more attractive to consumers, whether it's in regard to pricing or whether it's just in regard to how they can receive their item, that they can receive it quicker.
I feel like, so I want to dig into that point you made about the seasonality, because besides the holidays, you also have Amazon Prime Days coming up, right? And so, there's often this kind of pressure for the competition to also cut prices and also offer deals during this time period. So next week, Amazon has its Prime Days. And then we'll see the Walmart, the Target, et cetera, offering their deals. What are you looking for on that front? Are you expecting that to be potentially a tailwind, but at the same time, you wonder how much impact that will have to both pressure on margins because of some of the deals they would have to offer to keep up? What's your thought on that, Megan, in terms of the data that you all analyze?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, and that's something where we would want to see some tailwinds there. We would want to see some increases in web visits. We'd want to see some increases in sentiment from people who are, competitively pricing out and saying, okay, Amazon's having their Prime Day event, but are other companies also following suit? Will Best Buy follow suit? We certainly expect it to. How competitive can it be? And if we don't see that boost in Best Buy, obviously we don't expect a significant boost as we would in, say, Amazon itself in terms of that traffic, but we would expect to see some type of a bump there to just show that the company is able to be somewhat competitive here. And we'll certainly be monitoring for that, and then also into those holiday sales to see, how attractive does Best Buy look to the consumer, and can that in-person, in-store edge help it this season? We'll see, but it's certainly, at least in our data, typically in the past couple of months, if I were to come on, I wouldn't have very many positive things to say about Best Buy. So this is the first time that we're starting to see that momentum and starting to see signs that there could be some tailwinds this season for Best Buy.
Yeah, Megan, real quick here, the last thing, Best Buy relies on foot traffic also. They do have their, their e-commerce arm also, but they rely on traffic. Are you guys seeing anything? Because keep hearing reports that, consumers are going to be spending less this holiday season than they did last season or the season before. Are you guys seeing any data that traffic's actually pulling back just in the retail, the retail space in general?
I was just looking into this, and I think the August retail numbers actually were stronger than expected. Those look strong, and we're seeing some consumer resilience in our data. So we may have a little bit of a contrarian view. I was just looking at a couple of retailers this morning that were surprising, unrelated to Best Buy, but one is a Birkenstock that we see a lot of consumers clamoring there. And so it's interesting for us to see, I think that there's some expected weakness this season, and we just aren't seeing that weakness yet. We'll see how the consumer holds up through the end of the holiday shopping season. If maybe they're just shopping earlier, there certainly could be something at play there, the consumer trying to get ahead of those purchases. But at least for us, we see a strong consumer heading into this holiday season. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
It will be interesting to see how that shakes off and where the consumer actually puts their dollars. Thank you, Megan. That is Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Have a great weekend, Megan. All right, for the trading perspective on all things Best Buy, this is all you.